We could rule them like gods. Angry gods.
So let's just jump into the ground rules, because you don't give a fuck about the intro. This is not based off how strong I think they are in the game MultiVersus. This has nothing to do with the game itself, besides the selection of characters. This has to do entirely with how strong I think these characters are based off their original appearances in their canonical series. So we're talking about how the Iron Giant from the movie The Iron Giant would fare against, say, Finn the Human from Adventure Time. We're not talking about the game. We're talking about the show Adventure Time and the movie The Iron Giant and all the other properties that these characters originate from. That is the idea. Certain characters will be excluded from this list. That includes Reindog, because he does not have a canonical origin for his character, as well as any characters that are leaked. I'm not going to be worried about characters who are leaked. That's not my concern, but rather I'm going to be focused on the official announced roster. So essentially all the characters that you can see on the MultiVersus website. Additionally, certain characters are going to have multiple entries. Specifically, that's going to be Steven Universe and Finn the Human. The reason these characters have multiple entries is because they both are protagonists of long-running series, and because of that, they both experience a lot of power creep. So I thought it would be productive to give them rankings based off where I think they start and where I think they end. For other characters on this list, you're not going to really see huge power creep for the characters like this, huge discrepancies in their abilities, unless it's something like the DC characters where you have a million different universes in which these characters all vary in strength very heavily. So for the DC characters, we're going to be generalizing, but because Adventure Time and Steven Universe have much stricter canonizations, we will be giving those characters multiple entries. And for the sake of the ranking, we are going to be using this beautiful graphic that I made in Photoshop. The reason we're not going to be using Tier List Maker is because for some reason I am IP banned from Tier List Maker and I am not allowed to make tier lists of my own. I don't know why, but that's the situation I'm in. And for me to be able to do things like give certain characters multiple rankings, I had to use Photoshop. But it's okay, because I think it turned out pretty good looking. I'm pretty happy with it. All right, and with that all said, I think we can jump into it, starting with our bottom three characters being Velma, Arya, and Shaggy. Now, Shaggy and Velma both scale pretty much directly towards each other. They both show strength feats that suggest that they're wall level, as well as being able to keep up with Scooby-Doo, who is a Great Dane, meaning if his top speed matches that of a real-life Great Dane, would suggest that they're running at 30 miles per hour, which is absolutely superhuman. However, despite me thinking that both Velma and Shaggy are wall level, I placed Velma below Shaggy and below wall level, appropriately named, because she has a massive weakness that Shaggy doesn't, right? And that is her glasses. This character has a trope of losing her glasses, and during this time, she is essentially completely useless. She's effectively as useful in a dangerous situation as a human baby, and she has to stop everything that she's doing, get on her hands and knees, and look for her glasses, right? I wear glasses of my own, and if these were 5 feet in front of me, I would see them, right? Not only that, Velma's glasses are incredibly thick-rimmed. The glasses are so massive that I should be able to see those from 10 feet away. So the fact that they can be directly in her face and she can't see them essentially means that without her glasses, she's blind. Arya is incredibly skilled with the needle, and she's also, although not superhuman like Shaggy and Velma, she is peak athlete. She's essentially the peak human form a human could realistically take without accomplishing feats like keeping up with a Great Dane. So I think Arya would be able to very easily knock the glasses off of Velma, and then once she gets that far, it's essentially a free win. Next up, we have Harley and Batman. Now, the explanation for Harley's placement is essentially pretty much the same as comparing Shaggy and Velma, which is that they're from the same universe, they interact a lot, and they pretty much scale to each other. Harley is just so incredibly skilled and is able to have access to all sorts of weapons that I think Harley could definitely beat Shaggy in a fight, but would definitely lose to Batman. I think you could certainly make an argument for Batman being higher than this. I think that's 100% fair, but I'm sort of taking Batman's placement with a grain of salt because although he has this whole idea of being able to prepare for any situation and any threat, I'm kind of imagining this as more of a street fight, and so I'm not giving that benefit to Batman. I'm essentially imagining this fight happening with all of Batman's traditional gadgets, including things like the hook shot, or not the hook shot, that's Legend of Zelda, the grappling hook, batarang, the bombs. That's more what I'm imagining that Batman has in this fight, which would definitely still stomp Shaggy, Arya, and Velma, but I don't think it's enough for him to rival the characters above him. So next up, I think we have Steven. Steven is a character I'm probably the most unfamiliar with. I watched season 1 of Steven Universe, but after that, my knowledge starts becoming very minimal, but I did do some research. In season 1, we see Steven rip an arcade machine off of the wall, which is probably wall level. We also see in the Steven Universe episode, The Return, that Steven slammed his fist on his dad's dashboard, and he actually causes the door to break and the passenger airbag to deploy. So Steven Universe, even as a child, is abnormally strong and is definitely superhuman to some degree. He has his matter manipulation with being able to create the shields. He can fuse, obviously, but that doesn't really matter in a 1v1 situation. And then he also has other abilities that include shapeshifting, age manipulation, weapon creation, regeneration, and healing. So all in all, Steven, I think, is superhuman enough and is flexible enough with what he can do with his gem powers that there's a good shot against Batman. I think Steven might still lose against Batman, but again, this is a Batman who is just going to come across Steven on the street. But I think if Batman's going to win this fight against Steven, it's going to be purely based off of inexperience on Steven's part. Next up, we have a big collection of characters. We have all of the Looney Tunes characters, starting off with Taz. With Taz, I was just kind of head empty when I made this placement. Taz is essentially depicted as being dumb, while also not being necessarily stronger to any sort of capacity or more powerful than any of the other Looney Tunes characters. All of the Looney Tunes characters benefit from the tune physics that they all share, where they can get flan like a pancake and be perfectly fine. How much credit you actually give that to the characters themselves and how much you give it to the world that they're in is debatable, and I think it's fair if you don't think they deserve that sort of durability feat that they all universally share. It sort of falls in this gray area of, well, if Steven Universe was in a Looney Tunes world, could he get flying like a pancake and be fine? Like, is this a universal influence, or is this something that is just normal for characters to have in this world? You know, like, is it the characters or is it the world that they inhabit? It's debatable, but I'm going to give it to the characters for the sake of this video. That's the decision that I decided to make. And because of that, all of the Looney Tunes characters have this incredibly high durability stat that essentially allows them to be mutilated in very extreme ways and suffer no damage. But yeah, Taz is at the bottom essentially because he doesn't have a lot of feats, and he's depicted as often being stupid and is very regularly outsmarted by bugs. After that, we have Tom and Jerry. Again, Tom and Jerry scale very directly to each other. For example, when Tom and Jerry are both in their muscular forms, they essentially scale directly to each other. There's no reason to think that one is overpowering the other. Of course, this is a sort of state change that isn't really traditional for the character. It is evidence that they scale to each other rather directly, all right? It's the same logic as with Batman and Harley and with Shaggy and Velma. They scale pretty damn directly. The only reason I have Jerry above Tom is that Jerry is often depicted as being able to outsmart Tom more so than Tom outsmarts Jerry. That's the only reason, although I do think Jerry being over Tom doesn't really matter. You can make arguments for Tom being stronger. For example, Tom actually has a feat where he was able to redirect electricity and shoot it at a meteor, destroying it completely, which is at least town level, but it's probably far higher. It really depends on how large the meteor is. But I think that's a little unfair because Tom actually received help from Jerry in order to accomplish this feat. So it's a little misleading. It's really a sort of situation where there's no reason to not have Tom and Jerry in the same spot. You can make arguments as to who is the better between the two of them, but really, I'm effectively putting them in the same spot. And then there's Bugs, who is essentially here because of plot armor. Bugs is essentially always in a position of power in any situation that he's in. He's more clever than you, he's more cunning than you, and he will get his way pretty much no matter what. You can make an argument for Bugs topping this list, and the reason is because he has something called plot manipulation. Plot manipulation is essentially the ability to write into the narrative whatever you want. And I have mentioned this before on my Twitter. Shout out to the guy on the MultiVersus Discord who said I was based for my Bugs Bunny take. But yeah, I mean, I think Bugs just has general plot armor, but I'm not going to give the full-on plot manipulation thing to him because I think that's a boring way for the top character to top the list. The top character will still be boring anyway because it's going to be exactly who you expect it to be, but whatever, you know, like there was no reality where I couldn't put him at the top, but we're getting there. Next up we have Finn, the Iron Giant, and Garnet. So the first thing you might think when you see this is, okay, how the hell is the Iron Giant this low? He is a 50-foot tall murder robot. And that's fair because I originally expected to put this character much higher as well. But what I sort of realized when researching for the Iron Giant is that all his abilities are effectively lasers. And he's kind of a one-trick pony in that sense. Pretty much everything he does is shoot lasers, and that's kind of it. And not just that, he shoots them very slowly. Because of that, I think that if you have the speed feats to dodge these lasers and the strength feats in order to deal damage to the Iron Giant, I think you win. Which is crazy, but I do honestly believe that if you have decent enough speed and strength feats, you will win against the Iron Giant. A character like Finn has also tackled very large opponents and has done so successfully. So I think Finn has a very reasonable chance against the Iron Giant. Honestly, you could argue that maybe Bugs has a really good shot against the Iron Giant. I think that's completely fair. My problem though is that I have doubts about Finn's attack potency being high enough when we're talking about Finn from season 1. I think Finn from some of the later seasons, like with the grass sword, absolutely can win against the Iron Giant. I do think that Finn has the attack potency, but Finn from season 1 and season 2, I really don't think he has the strength and the feats in order to defeat the Iron Giant. As for Garnet, well, Garnet was able to punch a mountain and cause a landslide. That's pretty impressive on its own, and also Garnet has shown the ability to be able to keep up with very, very fast opponents. So I think Garnet has both of what she needs in order to take on the Iron Giant. It makes more sense when I just sort of imagine it in my head playing out. Like, I don't think a character like Velma could dodge the Iron Giant's laser, but I think characters like Garnet and Finn have the agility to be able to realistically outmaneuver the Iron Giant. Next up, we have Steven and Jake. This is a massive jump from large town to multi-continental, and the reason is because Jake and Steven both have the ability to take on massive forms, just absolutely like colossal sized forms. By this point in the show, with older Steven, he has taken on a bunch of new abilities that younger Steven hasn't. Some of these abilities include resurrection, the ability to possess minds to a limited degree, sound manipulation, and the ability to heal to an even greater degree than he previously could. But the real important thing for this placement is his pink state, which when he's in it, he can become Monster Steven, which is the size of a mountain. And it's this that causes me to believe that Monster Steven is probably multi-continental level. However, we also have to talk about Jake because I just really played up Steven's abilities, so what does Jake have to offer? Well, Jake can reach the size that Steven can, and probably much larger. The lack of a limitation on Jake's ability to shapeshift is shown as early on as episode 1 of Adventure Time. Where he gets bitten by a zombie and now has a zombie bite on his hand. And using the same sort of logic that shows like The Walking Dead and other zombie media use, the infection from Jake's bite actually has to travel up his arm from his hand into the rest of his body in order for him to turn. What Jake does in this moment in order to problem solve this dilemma is that he stretches his arm away from him and physically runs away from his arm. And while he's doing this, Jake never reaches a limit on how far away he can stretch his arm. In fact, the reason that Jake eventually does turn isn't because he reaches a limit on his shapeshifting, but instead is because he gets tired and has to stop running away from his infection. And that is a really funny way to me of displaying Jake's incredible ability to shapeshift with seemingly no limit. However, we definitely do know that there is a limit to Jake's shapeshifting, and that is because of the episode The Limit. In this episode, Jake and Finn are going through a maze, and they essentially use Jake as the breadcrumb trail so that they don't get lost. So what they do is that they leave Jake's bottom half at the entrance of the maze, and while they're exploring it, they just have Drake continue to stretch so that they always know the way back using Jake's body. The problem is that this maze is massive, and we don't get a proper sense of scale for how large this maze really is. But we do know that Jake now has a limit because of this episode. Additionally, Jake has shown to have resistance to mind manipulation, because in the episode Thank You, Jake puts on Ice King's crown and suffers no effects of the crown's magic, despite how Simon ends up when he puts on the crown. Because of this, I don't think the ability of Steven to possess minds would actually be effective at all when fighting Jake. So really, in order to put up a fight at all against Jake, Steven would have to be in his monster form, but if he does that, he's going to be in rage mode, and I don't think he'd be able to use his abilities properly. And so because of that, I do think Jake is higher on the list than Steven. We've now made the jump from multi-continental to what I think is large planet level. And that is because Finn has a very specific feat that places him at large planet level. And that is him killing and destroying Orgolorg. Finn, with his grass sword, was able to kill Orgolorg, who is a being who is known to be able to destroy planets. Because of this, we know that Finn was able to kill a planetary level threat, which would therefore make Finn planetary. Now, that probably sounded a little ridiculous too. I mean, Finn the human is able to kill planetary level threats, but our final two entries are where it really starts to get a little ridiculous. Starting off with Wonder Woman. We've seen Wonder Woman accomplish feats such as being able to move the Earth and the Moon simply by pushing it, and she's also able to keep up with Superman in hand-to-hand combat. So obviously Superman tops this list. Let me just reveal him because the cat's already out of the bag. But being able to fight Superman in hand-to-hand combat when he's topping this list means you can't be far below him. She's also able to keep up with Superman in terms of speed, which is massive, and she also has a ton of abilities that she has access to. This includes, but is not limited to, flight, mind manipulation, illusion creation, electricity manipulation, reality warping, weapon mastery, animal manipulation, non-physical interaction, and telepathy. So yeah, Wonder Woman pretty much has it all, but you know who has even more? Superman. For example, according to my research, he was able to generate enough power to restore all future timelines after they were wiped out. I have no idea what that means. I don't have all the context. I didn't read the comic that this was from, but I'm pretty sure it's real. And if that's real, like what could you possibly want from me? I also know that I said that Wonder Woman could keep up with Superman, but at the same time, Superman has a feat where he was able to cross the universe in seconds. I can't say for certain, but I don't think Wonder Woman can do that. Maybe she can, but that sounds like the sort of ridiculousness that only Superman could accomplish. Also, you thought it was impressive that Wonder Woman could move the Earth and the Moon just by pushing it? Well, let me tell you, Superman was able to move stars with just his breath. So, I mean, if that's not gonna convince you, I don't know what will. But yeah, that pretty much includes the list. Those are my final thoughts. I am by no means gonna try and say that that is a definitive list. It isn't. I know it's not. I know a lot of you probably know better, and you know what? That's okay. Cause I acknowledge that. And you know what? I know that a lot of you out there probably know a hell of a lot better. So let me know. Let's talk. Let's be civil. I'm curious. I'm curious to know what you guys have to say. You probably have more to say about Steven Universe than I do. So let me know. I'm very curious what your guys' list would look like. But yeah, with that, I think we're done with the video. If you enjoyed, don't be stingy. All right, give me some support. I'd appreciate it. It takes some effort. It takes a decent amount of effort to make these videos. So if you thought it was good, if you enjoyed it, do whatever you want. I'm not even gonna tell you. You know what you can do. You're not stupid. Just do it. Whatever you think is appropriate. That's what I'll take. You know, I think that's fair. I think that sounds fair. So if you enjoyed, thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the support you guys give me, and have a great day.